Now, we've got a lot of WWE Hall of Fame updates. The Hall of Fame is being taped this Wednesday and Thursday across 2 days. It will then air as one special on Peacock here in the States, and I guess WWE Network everywhere else. On Tuesday, April 6th, that will be the air date for the Hall of Fame. It will not be live. It will not be in front of fans, which might be the one good thing to come out of this. Batista will not be going into the Hall of Fame after all as part of the 2020 class due to a scheduling conflict. He posted this on his Twitter. Unfortunately, due to previous obligations, I am unable to be part of the WWE Hall of Fame this year. By my request, they have agreed to induct me at a future ceremony where I will be able to properly thank fans and people who made my career. So it sounds like he would just rather wait until fans were... I mean, I don't doubt that he has a scheduling conflict, but it sounds to me like he's perfectly content to wait until there are fans there so he can have a proper Hall of Fame induction. So Hogan, Hall, Nash, and Sean Waltman, I guess, collectively as the NWO, are now the de facto headline attraction for the 2020 class, because the plan is, as I understand it, for those inductees last year to get their moment and be able to give their speech this year. So it's like they're inducting two classes, and the NWO now is the headline attraction. Now, as far as this year's class is concerned, we already know that Molly Holly is going in. We know Eric Bischoff is going in. I talked about that last week. We learned of 3 more names this week. One has not yet been confirmed by WWE, but it will likely be confirmed within a matter of a day or two. That being Rob Van Dam, one of only a handful of Grand Slam champions, Grand Slam winners in WWE history. I mean, to me, Rob Van Dam is a no-brainer as far as going into the Hall of Fame based on his body of work across ECW, WWE, even just in WWE alone. And as popular as he was during his time, in the company, his time in the company actually goes back to 1997. There are some people, I think, who may forget about that because it was a relatively brief thing. It only lasted a matter of weeks. But when WWE and ECW were sort of working together, and ECW talent made a handful of appearances on Raw is War back in 97, when Vince McMahon was just trying to get something going because they were getting their asses kicked every week by WCW. So WWE and ECW decided to work together a little bit. Rob Van Dam was the one ECW talent who sort of rebelled against the House of Hardcore, and he was aligned with Jerry Lawler, and he made a bunch of appearances on Raw as Mr. Monday Night. That's where the Mr. Monday Night moniker comes from. So that really was his entry into WWE many years before he came in full-time. He spent 700 days as the ECW television champion, by far their longest reigning champion, a reign that only came to an end due to a broken ankle. And he had a classic series of matches with Jerry Lynn. The chemistry those two had in the ring was just unbelievable. Those were probably his most memorable matches in ECW. And I thought Van Dam, when he came into WWE in 2001, he was one of the best parts of that whole Invasion period. When Rob Van Dam came into WWE in 2001, he was one of these talents who was must-see. He was doing things in the ring that nobody else in the company at that time was doing. He was a lot of fun to watch. I still, from time to time, I'll go back and watch the hardcore title ladder match he had with Jeff Hardy. That might have been my favorite match on that whole SummerSlam card in 2001. So Van Dam was that really 2001 into 2002. That was really his big period when he first came into the company. He was part of the first ever Elimination Chamber match in Madison Square Garden. That was where he inadvertently crushed Triple H's throat midway through the match. Obviously, one of his crowning achievements, if not his crowning achievement in the company, was not so much winning Money in the Bank at WrestleMania 22, but cashing in advance, telling John Cena, I'm cashing in on you at the ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view. They had that great match at the Hammerstein Ballroom. I only wish I was there. What an amazing atmosphere. John Cena walking into the Lion's Den. That's where the whole sign comes from. If Cena wins, we riot. And they had a great match. It ended with Van Damme getting the win, becoming the new WWE champion. And then, of course, they reestablished the ECW brand. So he was a dual champion. He was the WWE champion, and he was also the ECW champion for a period of only a few weeks. Didn't last very long because at the beginning of July, so this would have happened in mid-June, and I think it was right before Independence Day, is where he and Sabu got pulled over. They got busted. There was that arrest. That arrest is what led to his downfall. That was pretty much the end of the biggest push he ever got in WWE. They couldn't get those titles off him fast enough. And in the span of, I think, 2 days, he dropped the WWE title on Raw, and I think at the ECW tapings the next day, they took the ECW title off him as well. That was really the end of his real push in the company. He never, ever again got that level of push in WWE after that arrest. They were pulled over with pills, and I think Sabu had drug paraphernalia on him. So, unfortunately, that was the end of his run as a double champion in the company. But he spent, off and on. He spent a few more years in the company. He did leave to go to TNA for a while. Eventually, he came back in 2013. He was always very popular. He's got some classic matches under his belt. And a very deserving inductee. I don't think anybody is going to debate the merits of RVD going into the Hall of Fame. And certainly nobody is going to debate the merits of this guy going into the Hall of Fame. And if they do, then they're a fool. And that is Kane. Kane was a guest on The Bump. They were following their new pattern of surprising people on the air with these induction announcements. They had The Undertaker. He was sitting in his car, and he chimed in to talk to Kane, and they let Undertaker make the announcement that Kane was going to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, and Kane was very emotional. He was speechless. He could barely speak. It meant a lot to him to have The Undertaker be the one to make that announcement for him. And I said this on Twitter. Few men period, but especially guys that are that big, have had the longevity and the versatility that Kane has had in his career. In fact, I was thinking about his health history in the company, and a lot of the top stars have missed pretty significant time over the years with various injuries and muscle tears and surgeries and neck operations and all kinds of stuff. The Rock really didn't miss too much time for any kind of major injury in his career, but The Rock never had the kind of longevity that Kane had. Kane, over the course of all those years, just as the Kane character, going back to 1997, I can really only think of one time that he missed any significant period of time with an injury. I think it was a bicep tear in 2002. And he missed, I think, at least a few months, if not several months. I cannot think of another period where Kane missed any significant length of time for any kind of a major injury. I'm sure he had plenty of nagging injuries and stuff. To me, that may be one of the most impressive things about it, because he was one of the top main event guys working that same schedule, wrestling. I mean, I think he might have the record for the most number of matches on TV. Randy Orton just mentioned on the Broken Skull Sessions with Steve Austin that Orton is about to, I think, surpass Kane's record in the next few months of most WWE matches on TV. So this guy has been in the trenches, working night in and night out. And look, it's got to be a lot harder when you're that big. When you're almost 7 feet tall, 300 pounds, you've got that much more stress on your knees. That, to me, is what makes it really impressive that he's been able to have the kind of run that he's had. But I mentioned, I was trying to think of a word that made sense, and I came up with, versatility is the word I kept coming to for the fact that you can almost plug him in anywhere that you needed him. We've seen him portray the sinister, evil monster who just goes around destroying people. And we've seen him play it up more for comedy. The Kane-a-Rooney and the Canaanites. And then later on with Team Hell No with Daniel Bryan. Or the stuff with Hurricane Helms. I mean, he has had these periods over the years where he's gone from babyface to heel, monster to comedy player, whatever you needed him for. He was always over, and he could play that role, even through the Authority era. With what would I used to call him? Libertarian Kane. Yes. He could even do that. So, to me, I look at him and his body of work, and more than any one specific match, because I don't look at Kane and have a whole list of 5 or 10 classic Kane matches. He's had a lot of good matches, memorable matches, even very good matches over the years. You know, in terms of that one singles classic, I think a lot of people would probably say Undertaker, the match at WrestleMania, the Inferno match. Less for, you know, the technical aspect of them, and more because at the time it was just these two larger-than-life giants going one-on-one in this epic brother versus brother feud. I think a lot of people would probably cite those matches first, but nobody is going to mistake those matches for, you know, a wrestling clinic. At the same time, does Kane need to be wrestling the same way that Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels and Kurt Angle would wrestle? No, because that wasn't the type of wrestler that he was. Although he did have some pretty good matches with Kurt Angle. It was a U.S. title match, I think, on SmackDown once, back in 2001, that I remember being pretty impressive. Kane was, hey, never forget that one Raw match where Kane and Big Show started chain wrestling. They were trying something different. But that's not what those guys are in the ring for. They're not in there to be Thez or Gotch, you know? I mean, so Kane and his role, I thought, was just, you know, I will always have love for the original Kane. Nothing beats the original Kane, from that entrance to the look, the way they booked him as this unstoppable monster, Paul Bearer in his corner. Kane was awesome. That first iteration of Kane. For me, who do I, you know, if I had to pick one incarnation of Kane that really stands out to me as the best, as much as I love the original Kane, the one thing that might trump it is the one from the beginning of 2000. He changed his look ever so slightly. Same mask, although it was a little bit darker. But this guy, he was just a fucking unit, this guy. This guy was a monster. Absolute beast. You hear that word thrown around sometimes, beast. This guy was a beast. Go back and watch early 2000s Kane. Other people love Kane after he unmasked. They had him all chained up with the towel on his head. Yeah, at the beginning there too, he was pretty badass. But I think that early 2000 version of Kane, when I just look at that guy doling out one-handed chokeslams to people like it's nothing, that to me is probably the most impressive version of Kane. But, you know, you think, what are some of the classic Kane matches? And you think of the first match with Undertaker and the Inferno match with Undertaker. First blood with Stone Cold at King of the Ring when he won the WWE Championship. Deserved longer than a 24-hour title reign. Still bothers me that he only had the 24 hours with that belt. Obviously, the 2001 Royal Rumble match where he lasted 53 minutes. Always love going back and watching him hit Honky Tonk Man over the head with the guitar. But the best match Kane was ever involved in, and some people will disagree with me on this, and that's fine. If you ask me what's the best match that Kane ever had, right? We're not just limiting it to singles matches. What is the best Kane match? My answer is very simple. The best match that Kane has ever been involved in his life was The Shield's debut at TLC 2012 in Brooklyn. It was The Shield in their first ever match together against Ryback and Team Hell No. Kane was part of that match. That was a fantastic match. And the best one that I can ever remember Kane being a part of. And then we have the third name going into the Hall of Fame this year. And that is the great Khali. The biggest star to come out of India. Former world heavyweight champion. Innovator of the Punjabi prison match, and an induction speech that will be talked about for years to come. Hey, look, Khali is, you don't have to sell me on the fact that Khali is huge in India. I hear, you know, clearly he's a very big deal to the population over in India, and he still trains talent to send over to the States and send over to WWE, so he is still involved in the business. Just because he's not on WWE television doesn't mean he's not still involved in training people and having a hand in that. But man, when I think back to all those great, classic Khali moments, the list is very long. I mean, we've got the, there was the time that he, who can forget that great, how about I just do this? How about I just share a story that Chris Jericho told in his book? I think it was Jericho's second book, The Best in the World at What? I Have No Idea, which is on Audible, by the way. So if you use our link, you can get the book for free. Cheap plug. But I always love this story, and it's probably the best Khali story that I've heard. It's 2009. Big Show is teaming with Chris Jericho and CM Punk in a match against Khali, Undertaker, and one of the Hardy Boys. I think it was Matt, but it's not relevant to the story. They're in Puerto Rico, okay, and they're having this six-man tag team match. And the Big Show was getting hot because Khali was stealing his moves. He did the deal in the corner where he shushes the crowd, tells them to quiet down, and then he chops the guy right in the chest. Well, that's a Big Show spot. And, guys are very protective of their shit. Certain guys have certain moves and spots in the course of a match that they use. And they don't want to, especially if you're a veteran, right? If you're a veteran and a headline guy like Big Show is, and here comes someone else who's stealing your spots, they get very upset about that. And Khali started using it. So Big Show is out on the apron, he's watching this, and he is pissed. And Jericho knows that shit's about to go down when they get back to the dressing room. Sure enough, Big Show sees Khali walk in. He says, "Hey, motherfucker, why do you keep stealing my spots? That's bullshit." And Khali, in that thick accent of his, he plays dumb, and he just goes, "What do you mean, bro?" And Big Show says, "Don't play that innocent bullshit with me, because I've talked to you before about this. I've told you before to stop stealing my stuff. You can't even do any of it properly anyway because you're the fucking shits." Now I really wish Big Show was still in WWE so that he can induct Khali and call him the fucking shits. But Khali then gives an all-time classic response by telling the Big Show, "You're the shits too, bro." Well, that set off Big Show. He threw the first punch. He nailed Khali right in the jaw. Khali didn't go down. He may have stammered backwards, but Khali did not go. He got the WMD punch right to the jaw. He did not go down. In fact, he even threw a punch right back at Big Show. And finally, Big Show, he goes to throw this wild swing. And he trips over a chair, and he goes down. Khali falls down on top of him. At that point, the other wrestlers step in to separate them. I don't know why you would do that. That's like stepping in between Godzilla and King Kong. But Khali claims that Big Show, he sat in the corner of the dressing room when it was over, and he was crying like a baby. Something tells me I think Big Show would have a different assessment of that. But that's what Khali says anyway. But for this story alone, Khali should be in the Hall of Fame.